Hi there, welcome to the channel. So, day 2 of the Zoom recording. What I'm going to do now is show you how I mic up the drums, send it to the Zoom, get levels, and then record and play. So, on the last episode I showed you how what I essentially do with the Zoom is I use the external mics and a model, a guitar model in one of the input channels, and I lay down a track with the guitar. I usually sing to it just so I know all the changes, you know, and I'll use the external mics for that just because it's right there and easy and quick. And then I'm going to have the metronome set, and all along I played along to it so that I'm locked down on that tempo. And then once everything is done, I now have a kind of guide track for putting down the drums and even guitars, and I usually keep it on for a while I'm doing all the instruments just so that I remember the changes, you know, like the bass changes, the guitar changes, the drum changes, whatever. So I'll usually keep that in play. So what I'm going to do is just show you how I set all this up. I've done most of the setup. I just need to fine-tune it, you know, and I want to do that on camera so you can just see how to set this up. And just so you remember, this is the Glyn Johns Method / Recorder Man. This part of it is kind of like Recorder Man, the two overhead mics that are positioned equidistant. The Glyn Johns Method adds a couple more mics. It could be just two. You could just have two overheads, or you can add a bass drum mic, which I've done. It's right out there. And then a snare drum mic, which I've done. This is like 3 inches from the edge of the snare. So this is a 4 mic setup. And the idea of it is to not have phase issues because we're far enough away from everything. We're equidistant, so the mics don't interfere with each other. So it's a really simple way to get a professional drum sound. I mean, this is what Glyn Johns used for the Eagles, John Bonham, you know, Led Zeppelin. You could go on and on, look up his credits. I mean, it's like a lot of 70s classic rock, you know. He did a lot of acoustic acts, folk acts. But anyway, this was his drumming miking method and his technique that he sort of standardized, and it became a very usable technique, especially for indie people, because you don't have to have a bunch of microphones, you don't have to have a bunch of know-how, you know. So I like it. So the main thing with it is you got to make sure that the microphones are equidistant, or you will have phase issues. So for this microphone right here, I'm going to be 2 drumsticks high. So you're going to see I'm going to have to take this up a bit. I'm going to lift it up here. And these microphones, a lot of these stands I have are in kind of worn out condition. Okay, so that was a little too high by about 1 inch, maybe and a half. Check it there. That's pretty good. Okay, now once you get it right, you're going to clamp it back down again, nice and tight. These microphones are a little heavy, so they can come down on you. Okay, so here's what I want to see. I want to touch the microphone with the 2 sticks, one atop the other, just like that. And then I'm going to move it to here and get this microphone set right here. And it's pretty close. I had to use another microphone stand because I got one of those inserts stuck in the mic. I mean, stuck in the stand that allows you to use different size microphones. I can't get it out, so I had to kind of flip around my mics, the ones that I was using in the stands. Okay, so here we are lined up with the 2 sticks. Move it out, almost there. And this mic you want to sort of point down at the bass drum, like aim it towards the bass drum. So this mic covers this region, this mic covers this region here. It would be like the toms, but ideally you're aiming it, I'm going to just kind of tilt it down and aim it towards the bass drum. So back here we go, here, check here, way off. Once I did that, it changed the trajectory of the angle. So here and here. Okay. That's just about it. Once again, I got my 2 sticks to line up here. I'm going to move it to the outer rim of this one, and it's pretty much perfect. And I think, you know, you don't have to be exactly dead on, but just, you know. And so now we have an angle here. We're going down to the snare, that way. And it looks almost like a 90-degree angle, the way I've got it set up. But you can do it other ways. You can bring it up, you know, if you want to try to cover different things. But this seems to work pretty well for these. And the microphones are Cascade Fathead 2s with the original transformers. I didn't upgrade the transformers. And they're a little dark sounding, so I really like them for cymbals, like overhead type stuff. Now, the snare is going to be here. And that's the AKG EP2, and it's one of my favorite microphones because it's not very expensive and it sounds great. The only thing is that there's a little harshness in the upper mids, but I can usually tame that with a little EQ. Okay, so, and just being careful with it. Now, what I want to do is I want to get this microphone down low enough so that it's right level with the rim of the snare, and it's not quite low enough. Once again, I told you I had to use some funny mic stands that I wouldn't ordinarily use, but I kind of like the way this longer mic stand works because I can get it down, I can get it away from the kit, whereas when I use one of the smaller mic stands, it sort of stays stuck in this area and you don't have as much room to work with. It gets in the way. Okay, now this is getting good. So now I've got it dropped down right where I want it and it's out of the way. So this was actually a happy accident. So now it's kind of more level. This is a large diaphragm condenser mic, and the mouth of it is now level where the stick is going to land. And I've got my handy dandy measurement stick. Right here is the 3-inch line, so I'm going to bring the mic up to 3 inches away from the rim of the snare. And that's, I read about this technique, leaving it about 3 inches. And I've had enough time to experiment with it and use it and have it work, so it works. It gets the perfect amount of snare projection. It's like you pick up the snare tone, you get the right amount of thwack, but also the right amount of tone, because you pick up some of the metal chill when you're out here like this, as opposed to just being on top of the skin, or the head. Okay, so I haven't tuned these drums yet, and I'm not going to actually record the drums today because I still haven't worked up an arrangement that I really am happy with. I just showed you how I did it in that first episode, and I'm going to get it done because I won't be able to shoot tomorrow, so I'll work on it during that time period so that hopefully when I come back in, I can lay the track down. Okay, so 3 inches here. Going back to our stick measurement here. That's good. That's good. So these are equidistant, in other words. And what I usually do is, as you can see, I've got the cymbal out a bit. I'll usually move that out a bit. I don't want it to drown out things, you know, so I'll try to keep that kind of an arm's width away. I might even move it out a little more. Same thing with the hats. I'll bring them out here kind of like this. That way I'm not like right on this mic with all this hot sizzly stuff. Okay, the other thing, the bass drum mic, that is out front and it's about a drumstick away. And I've experimented with 8 inches, 3 inches right on the head, and in this room, and with the head not having a hole in it, it's not ported, it's just the whole head is sealed. With that technique, that seems to work the best. You get the most like boom, like you get a big bass drum boom, but you also get some attack. So that's what I was going for, some, you know, a pinpointed attack, but then I like the resonating boom that you get from the 24-inch bass drum with it being sealed, no holes. That's what I picked up from the John Bonham method of setting up your drums. Sounds fantastic. Sounds like his. It really does. Like when you listen to the bass drum, not my playing for God's sakes, but the sound of the bass drum tone. So yeah, everything is set up now. Now let me show you the order of what goes to the zoom. The zoom is over there. I typically have it here, but for the purposes of this video, since I wasn't going to lay down the track, I've got it over there, and that way I can see the levels. Let me just check the levels real quick and see what we have. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to have to lift the bass drum up a bit, but everything else is looking pretty good. I'm going to, of course, fine-tune it. So, here's what's happening with the zoom. Now we've got our drums mic'd up, and remember, you don't have to use a snare mic. You don't have to use a bass drum mic. You could just use these two microphones. I've done it before, and it sounds really good. If you're doing if you play a type of music where you don't need to have really loud, big, massive, you know, sonically huge drums, if you want just more like a percussion presence, it's perfect because the snare won't be as loud, the bass drum won't be as loud. And it's a very kind of, you know, it's an equal distribution of the kit, I think. You get a good feeling for the whole kit, but you don't get as powerful of a snare and you don't get as big of a boom on the bass drum, obviously. So that's why I added the two mics, but I wanted to let you know that this recorder man technique, or Glyn Johns basically, if you have these two mics, you've got it covered. I mean, if you have a lighter drum kind of thing. I added the large frame condenser because I wanted like a professional, big, like heavy duty rock snare sound. And then on the bass drum, same thing. I wanted like that booming John Bonham, you know, big heavy bottom end type of sound. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you the inputs on the Zoom and what happens at the Zoom. We're going to go to the Zoom and I'll just talk to you over there. But basically what's happening is the large diaphragm condenser mic, the AKG, that is going to input 1. So it goes to input 1. This one here, this is what I call my left overhead. That goes in input 2. And I always think about that being the left side of the drum kit. And I like to capture the drum kit the way I play it, you know, like the way it would be from where I'm sitting. Next we have the right side, right? The right overhead. Even though this looks like it's low, it's still an overhead mic. Especially for the bass drum and this low tom. This microphone is going to be an input 3, and I think about that input 2 being on the left, input 3 being on the right. And I'm going to pan both of them. I'll go about 30 to 40 one way left, 30 to 40 to the right. And it just gives a bigger sound. You can also do this in the mixing process. I just, out of habit from recording on analog all those years, I always made sure on a tape machine or on anything that I was recording on that I was going to print tape to do the panning, you know, while I'm there. It just records better. I don't think it matters in digital. I think you can go back at any point because I've changed, you know, the panning and it hasn't changed the sound the way it does in analog. So, but out of habit, force of habit, I'm going to go to the left, pan to the left for number 2, pan to the right for number 3, down the center with the snare mic on channel 1, that'll be right down the center, bass drum right down the center. So now, that's what's happening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to check levels and I'll show you what these levels look like. In fact, we'll play the drums here. Now, cut in an insert shot so you can see how we get levels. And also, I'm going to have the headphones plugged in so that when I hit play and I hear that song start, I'm going to count off, give myself a nice click. Make sure you give yourself a nice 4-stick click or a 2-stick click, whatever works, like that. Right at the beginning of the recording, because you'll use that for the duration of the recording to cue in on all your instruments. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the same thing with the guitar. That's going to be 1, and then you start your guitar part, bass, so on and so forth. So I always make sure I get some nice, you know, 4 clear stick clicks in at the beginning of the recording. All right, so you'll have your headphones on. After we check levels, you'll have your headphones on, you hit play, and you go. Okay, here we are. We're at the Zoom, and as you can see, the snare drum is in input 1. I've got the level down pretty low, and I even had to cut the pad on the microphone. It's on the minus dB, 20 dB on the attenuator pad. That was just because the snare drum's really loud, so you got to cut it down low. Okay, so I got that down, and I have the preamp for the Zoom completely disengaged, and I've got my high Z off. Okay, and number 2, in the second channel, I've got it at like 12 o'clock. I'm not sure if that's going to work or not. I've got my levels at 100 here, and I've got my levels at 100 here. So these 3 are all at 100 and about at 12 o'clock. This is the left overhead, this is the right overhead, and this is the bass drum. Now, the other thing that happens is if I want to use an effect, which I do, I'm going to go over to the effects screen, So here's the effect button. I punch that, and I'm going to go up here and just turn it off so you can see what it looks like when it's off. So that's what it looks like when it's off. It just says insert effect off. Obviously you want to turn it on, and I already have it on the effect I want. So I go to the algorithm, dual mic, then the patch is number 26. That's called Big Shape, and I really like that one for snare. It's a little much for vocals, but I like it for snare. It's a big compressor. Okay, and what input screen is that on? Input 1 and 2. That means both mics are being affected by this effect, which is great because the other mic is also positioned over the snare. So both 1 and 2 are officially snare mics, even though number 2 is going to pick up the rest of the kit as well, probably more so than number 1 will because it's aimed directly at the snare, whereas the number 2 is an overhead. Okay, number 3, also an overhead, but no effect. We're going to record it dry. It'll sound great. Same thing with the bass drum, no reason. And as you know, I've got the bass drum mic out pretty far, and I find that makes it where I don't have to use compression when I record, and I still get a really big sound. Okay, so if I wanted to adjust this compressor even more to my liking, here we go. Compressor, threshold. You can go through ratio, attack, level. I've dropped the level before. That's another option. So there's a lot of things you can do, in other words, once you get inside this effect screen. But just understand that it's only affecting these two inputs, input 1 and 2. 3 and 4 do not have effects attached. So sometimes it's easy to get confused about which tracks are being affected by the effects. In this case, it's only going to be 1 and 2, which are the snare mics. Okay, now, I said something earlier about panning. Watch this. I'm going to exit out of there. I'm going to go to pan EQ. Okay, it says track 1, right? I want that to be center, and I'm going to record it dry. No reverb, no chorus, blah, blah, blah. All right, so I'm going to go over to track 2. Look what I'm going to do over here. I'm going to make sure that you can double check your faders too. That's at 102. I'm going to roll it back to 100. I'm going to take it back up. I'm going to make sure I'm 0 everywhere. I'm going to record it dry. But look here, I'm going to pan to the center. I'm going to go, okay, that was the left side, so I'm going to go left 40 here. And then let's go left 30. Left 30 here, right 30 here. So I've got a little stereo pan going. This one's going to the left 30 degrees. This one's going to the right 30% or so. Okay, and then on the bass drum, I'm going to just check and make sure I'm at 0 everything, recording dry. And look at that, the fader's way up to 109. I'll push it down to 100. And if I need extra gain, I'll use the gain from here. This is just giving me like basically unity gain at 100. Okay, so that's how I apply effects, and that's what's happening as far as the inputs. Remember, this is snare 1, this is the left overhead, this is the right overhead in input 3. So we got number 1 being the snare, number 2 being the overhead snare, number 3 being the right overhead, and this could be considered the left overhead, and then this is the bass drum. So we got 4 inputs, they're all armed. We've got our levels at 100. We've applied an effect to 1 and 2, which is basically the snare mics, and that is a pretty big compressor that's set at a pretty high level with a high threshold. And then we have nothing on 3 and 4, the bass drum and the right overhead, which is the other side of the kit. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the kit and start playing a little, and we'll just record and see what kind of levels we have, and then I'll adjust accordingly once I see the playback. When I actually do the take, I will move the zoom over by the drum kit so I can, keep an eye on it much easier than having to go back and forth. I can adjust levels that way. But in order to film it today, it was easier to just bring it out into the room, so I've got to go back and forth for now. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to play a little passage just to get our levels and see if everything's, recordable. It could be peaking. Oh, one last thing. Let's check our master. So in order to do that, we hit pan EQ. I'm going to go to the last track and then work my way over to number 24, and look here, we have it at 106, so that was a good thing to check. I'm going to roll that back to 100. Good, so that's at like the unity gain point. So now, what I'm going to do is do a quick little demo just to make sure that you can hear the drums and everything. And so we have everything set up, and just check our levels. So what I'll do is I'll play through, I'll record and play it, I'll do a little 30-second drum bit or whatever, and then we'll come over here and hit play and see what the levels look like, and we'll talk about, you know, what we should do, whether we should bring them up or bring them down or whatever. So here we go. Okay, so now we're going to check for levels. We could start with just checking input 1 and 2, just the snare, and just see what we have there. Now we'll move to, let's do the toms and just see what input 3 brings in. Okay, and then finally, input 4, bass drum. Alright, now, I don't know what those look like, but we'll look at them together when I go back over to the machine. Now I'm going to just run a little bit of the drum pattern and see what we have as far as, you know, the recording goes. All right, here we go. Let me run that one more time. All right, let's see what happened. I have no idea. So I'm going to hit stop, obviously. Then I'm going to hit return. It's like this F3 button right above stop. So it takes you back to 0. It's like an RTZ. Okay, and let's just see what happened. I may fast forward just a little bit, hit playback, and hopefully we'll get some drums here. Actually, let me do one more thing. Let's disarm these so we can actually see the tracks. That would help. So that's important. Make sure you disarm it so that you're back in play mode. And now you can see the levels, duh. So let's see what happened. So this looks like when I was just banging on individual elements, which makes me think that it needs to be turned up a bit because I don't see much happening here. Levels are really low and we want them much higher than that. Let's just fast forward a bit and see what happens later on. Okay, so here's some levels. Now, the snare drum needs to be louder. From what I can tell right here. Here we go. So I would make the snare drum louder. This one's looking pretty good because it's peaking and that one's peaking pretty well. Bass drum is not loud enough. Alright, so I'm going to go over there right now and just kind of see if I can get better levels right off the bat so I can show you what the levels should look like. Alright, here we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I just finished the take. I hit stop. I'm going to rewind or RTZ, return to 0. Take these off so we can watch the levels. And let's see what happened this time. I'm going to hit, I'll go forward just a little because I had to walk over there. And we'll see what, oh, there we go. All right, that looks better. I want that snare a little louder. And I want this to come off back a little bit. This is okay, and this looks okay now. See how we're getting good? Ooh, too much. So I'll roll this back. This is too hot. This is too hot. This, on the other hand, needed to come up. Okay, let's try it again. One more time. Okay, so I rearm 4 tracks. I have to push it twice once you get it rearmed. Okay, now I'm going to go back to 0. I'm going to undo the last one. We don't need it. It's obliterated. Record and play. Head over to the kit as fast as I can. put the mics back in place as they fall over. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's check it out and see what happened. All right, so I'm going to hit stop. We're going to reverse, return to 0. I'll take these off, take these off. I'll go forward a few because I know I was talking to get over to the kit, and let's see what happened. Good. This is an example of some good levels. So over here, look how we're getting up here into +6, but we're not going over, we're not hitting 0. Just getting a little flash of this orange, that strong signal, strong digital signal without peaking. Same thing's happening here. Now, you could peak every once in a while here, it's okay, because it won't probably peak there as well. But as you can see, I'm pushing this pretty hard. I got this up pretty well. These are pushing past 12 o'clock, at 2 o'clock. This one's at almost at 3 o'clock. You know, I've got the levels at 100, and so I got some pretty good levels there. That's a really good starting point. I'm going to fine tune, and if I had the, if I was sitting next to the Zoom, I would be fine tuning it on the fly. But I wanted to show you on the video, and it's hard to get good angles. So I think this worked at least to show you, you know, what happened. So next time, part 2 of the drum thing, we'll get deeper into it, and I'll show you how to take the drums out and clean them up in Audacity. All right, cool.